Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Dancing with Damage. I'm Ian, your resident philosopher.
And I'm Abby, your resident author.
And today, we talk about death. Sort of. We talk about changes to the medical system in the philosophy of the social blueprint.
Indeed, we went straight from the right to having a house to the right to control your future in the most finite sense of the term.
Wow. Certainly a grave topic. So if you are following along in the book, it is at chapter 39, page 174.
He looked it up already. I'm actually really impressed.
I rarely remember anything, so that is impressive for me. And as a brief recap, we are in Act 3 of the social blueprints. Blueprints.
Of how many acts?
That's right. There are Act 0,
Mm-hmm.
which was talking about damage, the force that is subconsciously having people self-sabotage, push people away, damage their own futures, and essentially cause society to become a very self-destructive entity.
Mm-hmm.
How fun.
I like that we have a whole act that was just sort of definitions, which is why it's Act 0. It's none of the policy or strategy, but it is important. So that's why it's Act 0 and not Act 1.
We could have been ahead of ourselves if we had just called that Act 1. I've made that joke before, but I love that joke. I mean, we just sound so much more accomplished if we have 5 acts. We only have 4 acts because we started at 0. Anyway, and then Act 1 was necessary changes to education,
Mm-hmm.
including, for example, the baby license,
Mm-hmm.
the Guardian Center,
Love that.
various modifications to the growing brain
Mm-hmm.
of social creatures, people.
And then Act 2.
That's right. Then Act 2 strikes. And wait, I guess we're in Act 2 then.
No, we're in Act 3.
What did I miss?
Act 1
Oh, whoops.
is the truth of the human condition.
Okay.
Act 2 is education. We made this mistake last time, too. Act 3 is necessary lifestyle changes. And Act 4, as a spoiler, is the banishment of damage. So we're pretty gung-ho about getting rid of that stuff.
You can trust us. We definitely wrote this, apparently.
We wrote it so long.
Well, okay, look, in my defense, Act 0 is a very short act. Okay, Act 0 is about damage. Act 1.
I wonder if any other authors have trouble and they need to reference their own glossary to talk about their work. It's probably easier with a work of fiction that is purely imaginary, a fantastical world or a thriller, because it's sort of more basic plot points.
I think I'm a basic plot point at this point. So yes, Act 0 is about damage. Act 2 is some key definitions, purpose of human life, what a soul is, all that good stuff. Act 2, necessary changes to education. And now, viewers,
Act 3.
Act 3, necessary lifestyle changes. We did talk about all sorts of things in this chapter, some policies we'd like to see changed, bearing in mind, Abby, that we could be many years in the future from the start of the acts, right?
Decades.
Probably decades. And it's just the same way, a plant grows, like we talk about often, a plant growing. You wouldn't expect an apple tree to produce an apple in its first little leafing. You might have to wait until the apple tree is a bit bigger, until it can produce fruit. And so we also have to wait until society is a bit more healed and ready.
Is it an official term, a leafing? Is that what the arborists say, the first official leafing of a tree?
If it isn't, they really should use that. I gift it to you.
Arborists watching this.
Botanists, plant enthusiasts. Arborists, I think, are more about cutting down trees, but they may be interested in leafings. So then we move on to today's topic, which it's a bit serious, but it's also something that we, when writing this, want people to discuss more openly. It's sort of a taboo subject. And moving forward, Abby, we would really like to be more blunt with it for the betterment of society.
If I may, sort of a metaphor. So when people in romantic relationships want to get to know each other, I find it's interesting that a lot of people wait to talk about very important things like, what are your financial goals? Do you have debt? Do you want kids? Are you struggling with addictions? Like what? No, but seriously, there are so many marriages that fail nowadays, and they say that the divorce rate is increasing. But then if you look into the statistics, there's also an increase in people when interviewed about why their marriages are dissolving. Oh, I found out that they had $100,000 in secret debt. Oh, I found out years later that they didn't actually want kids and they said they did. Or they didn't want kids, had kids, and then couldn't handle having kids. Or they had a problem with alcohol or smoking, as an example, and they thought they'd change and they wouldn't. Or just long term goals. I mean, some people maybe want to spend more time at home, relaxing, sort of doing things with their partner one on one. And some people prefer sort of gregarious social situations where they're out and about, and that's just a personality thing. But these traits and topics are considered taboo in society. But unless we discuss them right off the hop, unless we understand these things, then in essence, the relationship can't work. If you date someone for 5 years, but your religious views are so diametrically opposed that you can't coexist in a marriage, then you've wasted 5 years of your life. It is possible to love somebody and not be right for them. And that is a hard lesson to learn. I think that's an adult lesson to learn. But my point is, people need to tackle these subjects. These should not be things that we have to be brave and work our way up to. These should be things that we're willing and able and ready to discuss as a society to have healthy relationships, because it's important in a romantic partnership, in my example, to be able to tackle these things. So one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up.
I have concerns that Abby may feel she is not right for me at this time. I
No,
don't know what we didn't talk about.
no. Well, when we first met, before we even started seeing each other, we talked about this kind of stuff just as friends because they are important subjects and it's how you get to know the core of a person. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because while the ending of a life may be a very taboo and heavy subject, we don't deny that. It's a very heavy, weighted subject, and we understand that there's a lot of emotions surrounding it. It's also important to be able to take back control and be able to own it, because it's inevitable as humans to deal with this in our lives and the lives of our loved ones, and ignoring the situation, like a marriage. If you ignore the important, inevitable things that are really big, it becomes a problem later. And it's better to have sort of a foothold and discuss it and have a plan because it makes it less scary. And the point of this chapter is to make the inevitability of humankind less scary. We're trying to make death less scary by. No, but seriously, we are.
That's why you were asking me about life insurance earlier.
That's not funny.
That is not funny.
No.
I see what you're saying, Abby, and let me put it to you this way, perhaps. Have you ever seen me chop down a tree from time to time with an axe?
Unfortunately, I have.
That is terrifying. Now, when we swing an axe, do we place it against the tree and then rub it against the bark, or how do we do it?
You use a lot of momentum. You go as far away as you can safely, and then you go, or maybe that's just Ian.
You swing the axe back so it can travel forward faster. And the same is true, we feel, about social policies. You see, in order to have progressive forward policies, you have to be able to draw resources and pull back finances and resources from other areas. That is how the tree, which is getting the good result, can occur. We've talked a lot about areas of society that would cost an immense amount of resources to develop, the Guardian Center in particular, the teacher-student ratio in the new education system, exercise centers, the housing repossession system, all these things. Now, it is not our intention to view the medical system through a financial lens primarily, but it is an important consideration. Because, Abby, is there a period in someone's life where an individual is absorbing a disproportionate amount of resources from the medical system in Canada, for example?
Don't remember the exact number, but is it not the final few months, not even years, few months of someone's life?
Yes. Wherever you are, whatever region in the world you're in, and it depends sort of what parameters you're putting on your Googling. But it is pretty commonly accepted that in developed countries, a person is going to need the most medical assistance and resources in the last sort of 6 months of life. And so viewed through that lens, we also observe, don't we, Abby, that those final 6 months, are they typically, for that person going through that period of dying, good quality of life?
No. So, if I can use another example.
Hmm.
So, many of us have pets: cats, dogs, parakeets, iguanas, ferrets, whatever makes you happy. If one of our pets were suffering, we allow ourselves to bring them to a medical professional, a vet,
Hmm.
and allow their suffering to end. We can look at our furry friends and say, I love you so much that I don't want you to be in pain. You're telling me through your actions and your words that it's your time and you would like my help to get there. As humans, we have somehow taken that right away from ourselves through damage. And the care and compassion we're able to give our fuzzy friends who have clearly reached the end of their life, and most people would readily agree putting down an animal is hard, but it's often the right thing. For humans, we don't even get the consideration of the question. So, Ian, what sort of are we getting at here?
We're not talking about putting people down.
No. I'm just saying the conversation around animals and pets is one where we're willing to agree that there's a time in an animal's life where their life has come to a full end, and that we want as humans to do everything in our power to make that as peaceful and swift as possible so the animal does not suffer. But I am saying that as humans, if we have a human relative or friend who is at the end of their life and is suffering, we are not as readily willing to listen to them when they say that they are at the end of their time and they would like assistance in swiftly and painlessly meeting that end.
That's right. In Canada, we do have some legislation that's helping with this progress. But essentially, what Abby and I argue for in the social blueprint is at this stage in the acts that it become much more simplified for a person in their advanced years to decide they want to die, rather than linger with a very poor quality of life and at the same time drawing a lot of necessary resources away from perhaps areas that are more requisite of them. So there's a few reasons why we defend that position. The first is what we already discussed, that resources are finite. And so in ethics, it is best to use resources not in the last 6 months of someone's life, but rather proactively in the areas we talked about earlier. Two, a lot of people sort of instinctively understand that when you get to a certain age, you don't want to be kept alive through the constant medication and hospitalization and medical technologies that we see thrown at the elderly in this day and age. Wouldn't you agree, Abby, that when you talk to people or even in your own heart, it's not the kind of existence you would want for yourself?
There's a difference between being alive and living. And just because someone is technically alive does not mean that quality of life is sufficient to be worth the effort of being alive, is a weird way to say it.
Mhm. But we see in this damaged society we live in that it's often the family members who, for perhaps selfish reasons or perhaps
Damaged reasons?
damaged reasons, insist that the medical system infuse their older relatives with as much longevity as possible, even if it's to the detriment of the individual going through that period of their life, to the detriment of the healthcare system generally. We see that, even though, again, if we were in those shoes ourselves, we wouldn't want that prolonging treatment done on us normally. Because you have to remember, a lot of the time, when you're in your 80s and 90s, which is often when this sort of period of life is in this day and age, although the average age life expectancy is going down.
It is. It's decreasing for the first time ever.
Yeah, I think, well, hard to say, but in some countries it's, 80, 82, depends where you are. Females have a few more years on males. Good on them. But either way, these are the kind of ages you reach where the human brain is just not equipped to normally be very functional, where the human body is often not autonomous. This is not a good age, and especially when, as someone's slipping into the last months of their lives, usually pneumonia or bone issues or breathing issues or other organ issues. Long story short, we in our youths know we don't want to reach that stage, but for some reason, damage, society sort of insists on preserving those lives. So we would just want to see a society decades from now, because we recognize this generation isn't quite ready to sort of let go of the reins when it comes to allowing people to die if they choose. We would see a society that makes it very easy for a person to have autonomy and dignity and decide to die at the right time in their lives.
So this is a heavy subject, and we're not by any means advocating to kill people. We are saying that if somebody is at the end of their life,
Mhm.
to allow them to make that decision. As an example, my grandmother, my dad's mother, she had a wasting disease, and she did not have the access to medical assistance in dying or MAID. And she didn't want to live past a certain point where she couldn't take care of herself. She would have rather passed away when she was still capable, so her children and her family didn't see her that way. But instead, she did die very slowly over time, and my family did watch that. And it was hard for everybody, mostly because everyone involved knew that that was not her wish and that she would have much rather had a shorter life, but a better one that wasn't marred at the end with suffering and memories that were tainted. And that's just a personal example.
Mhm.
But there are examples where options exist now. Medical assistance in dying or MAID is an option. Right now, in some cases, the parameters are still very strict, but a lot of people with power of attorney are relatives and not the person who is in the position where they could use this service. And instead of allowing the person in question to say, you know what, it's my life, I would like the right to end it how I choose, usually through guilt, through damage, because the bonds between family members are eroding and people aren't spending as much time with their relatives anymore. We've discussed that at length.
Mhm.
And that usually results in, at the end of someone's life, the weight of death, the weight of loss, the weight of finality becomes so great that instead of listening to what a human being is saying to us and using the medical technology we have to make that end as swift and as painless as possible, which is what they would like, the person is so infused with guilt that their damage kicks in and they say, no, death is always bad because it's final. And it's scary because we don't understand it. And therefore, I have to avoid it at all costs, even at the cost of the dignity and well being of the person I'm keeping alive, often against their will.
That's right. So this chapter is actually, it may be sort of moot in the future, more so than it is now. You see, once society gets to this chapter of the acts, and we hope they do, if the steps prior have been followed, Abby and I foresee, as you likely foresee, that there's going to be a lot fewer seniors struggling with the massive mental health and physical health issues we see in the lead up to death. Because a lot of that is caused by isolation and loneliness and poor organ systems and physical health leading up to old age. If a car, for example, if you don't take care of a car and then it gets up to 200, 300,000 kilometers, it's going to break down a lot more quickly than if a car is very, very well maintained and the oil is changed and it's washed always and it's kept in good repair. Well, when it gets up to 200 or 300,000 kilometers, which in our analogy is like 70 or 80 years old, in car years, human years, then that car can be very fruitful and productive in those last 100,000 kilometers. So in the social blueprint, we talk about the new education system and the Guardian Center and the food centers and the exercise centers and the housing repossession system, allowing PSWs to be very hands-on and omnipresent. So there isn't this massive tidal wave of seniors going through this very protracted and painful period of dying that the medical system in many developed countries catches and absorbs with massive financial costs and massive personal cost and suffering. This would be much more minimal. But in the cases where it would still exist, Abby and I advocate for a paradigm shift for what we see today, which is keep someone alive at all costs for as long as possible, no matter what they might wish, unless certain things are met, to there should be a presumption that if someone doesn't have a good quality of life, that they can have the autonomy to very easily exit stage left. And I want to just make a little analogy before I pass it over to you, Abby, because what was the purpose of human life again? I forget.
To do the most good and show the most love and make the most sacrifice for the next generation.
I was looking at the fireplace today. Not the chairs aren't always facing this way. Sometimes they face the other way. I wasn't sitting on the back of a chair. And it occurred to me that the ideal human life is a little bit like one of the logs in the fire, not sort of burning and tormented by coals. That's not really what I mean. What I mean is the log goes into the fireplace, and the fireplace is like the world, and it's only there for a short amount of time. But what the log wants to do is to give off heat by sacrificing of itself, the carbon in the wood, to make the fireplace and the house, I guess the house is like the whole world, a warm and pleasant place for others, and leave the fireplace warm for the next piece of wood to come in so it can do the same. We don't want to be a kind of a piece of wood that just is charred and doesn't give off warmth and then is thrown into the snowbank because it's taking up room and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. Nor do we want to be a piece of wood that flames up and burns in 2 or 3 seconds, because then the rest of the night, the people in the house are shaking and cold because the flame has dissipated. We want to be a slow burn that eventually gives of ourselves. And so as people, when we give taxes into society and we give work into society and we give good deeds into society, we don't want all that to be negated by the last 6 months of our lives by taking all those resources and opportunities in the form of the medical system, absorbing those resources back. That would be like the wood taking back its fire. It's not what the wood wants at its core, you see? And so that is why we advocate for this paradigm shift. Now, Abby, let's talk a little about the fears of death, because you put it very well, that humans are afraid to broach the subject of death in this time. And so we've sort of broken it down, haven't we, in the book, as to when death should be feared and when it's not fearful.
Yes. So again, to quickly summarize, we are saying that in the last 6 months of someone's life, generally that is the most expensive time and that is the greatest cost to the healthcare system. And the reason we bring this up is not to be callous. It is to help reinforce what we're saying, to hopefully get you to consider it, that often these 6 months are also paired with the person in question who is dying being ready to die.
Mhm.
But it's the outside forces of their family and friends who are sort of forcing the medical system to do everything in their power. Often in these cases, they're not there mentally. Sometimes they're in a coma. Sometimes, they can't articulate. They've deteriorated to a point where they're just slowly wasting away to nothing, but they don't have a quality of life. So we're pairing it so you can sort of visualize the last 6 months of someone's life are often in modern society 6 months past the point where someone would have liked to have died. And they're also extremely expensive. So it's 2 strikes against them in society. And we have, again, as Ian said, summarized reasons why we think you should not have to fear death to sort of assuage some of that guilt, help the damage to claw itself back a little bit. So one of them, Ian, if I'm correct,
Mhm.
is the fear of leaving a dependent behind. So when somebody has reached an impressive age, generally all of their children or dependents have grown to an age where they are self-sufficient. Normally, somebody who is of an advanced age would not have a young, under the age of 18 dependent who depends on them. And often at that age as well, you wouldn't be physically capable of caring for someone of that young dependent age. So often it works out that that is not something we have to fear. What is another one, Ian?
Yes, Abby has started the list. I like this list. I think of it like, the Grim Reaper. If I said the Grim Reaper, what comes into your mind's eye, Abby?
Giant scythe.
Giant scythe just sitting in a corner or on the ground.
Faceless cloak.
A giant scythe wearing a cloak,
No, a faceless cloak. They're just bony skeletal hands, giant hood of a cloak. You can't see their face, maybe glowing red eyes, and a scythe.
A figure
Mm.
with a scythe. That is the common thing. And Abby's right. Instinctively, humans have been terrified of the Grim Reaper. But we argue there's reasons to flinch away and flee from this specter, and sometimes reasons to go and embrace it like an old friend. Hello, Mr. or Mrs. Reaper. I don't know. Grim, I don't know what that would be, Grim. If that first name is Grim, I don't know the proper title for the Grim Reaper, but sometimes you want to greet them as an old friend. Now, Abby lists one of the 5 reasons why humans have instinctively flinched away from death. And so once we make those clear, you can also see why the argument to make it easier for people to die when they reach a certain age doesn't need to be feared.
Beyond, they probably do not wish to continue to be forced to be alive, because often it's only medical intervention that's keeping them from dying naturally, and also the extreme cost. So we've said dependents. They don't usually have dependents who would suffer or perish in their absence.
Yes, we fear the Grim Reaper if dependents would be left stranded by a death. We fear the Grim Reaper when it portends the deaths of others, for example, ourselves, like in the case of a plague.
The Black Plague. Or recently, we had COVID.
We did.
So when one or many die during a plague or an epidemic, you immediately fear that any sickness will end up in death regardless of age, because it is not old age that is taking someone, it is something out of our control. So that is scary.
We fear the Grim Reaper as a third reason when the person dying is dying in great suffering, because death can be very painful. Isn't that the case? And then 4th reason we fear the Grim Reaper is if it's the death of a very good person who was doing a great value for society. Think Martin Luther King or these sort of figures in history that were their own category, I guess, or anybody in your community or you or whoever it is that has the great potential for good and dies before their time. Normally, when you reach 80 or 90, probably your days of great good works are behind you.
And to give an example, David Attenborough, we all love him. He's been protecting wildlife. I think he's 90 now, and he's still going at it. He is a great figure for good. And when he does eventually pass, which is hopefully not for a very long time, it will not be a tragedy in this case, because unlike younger people who are just starting their mission, he has a legacy. So even when he passes, the good he does for society will continue on in his works, in his books, in his documentaries, in his memory, because he's had years to build that legacy. It is more so a fear of death if somebody has the chance to start a revolution or to be a new voice of change and of power, but they don't have the chance to get a foothold yet. And usually by the time you're 80 or 90, if you are one of these pillars, you have a legacy that will follow suit, and you will die more of a savior than somebody who is a tragedy.
Now ask me what the 5th reason to fear death is.
What is the 5th reason?
I don't remember. Hold on. You see, this has not been a great chapter for me for remembering what is in here. This is sort of fun. I knew there were 5. Dies in pain. You and I should have remembered this one. The loss of a social bond.
Oh, yeah.
So, So if Abby or I died, one before the other, as one day we will, the other will fear the death of the other. One of us will fear the death of the other because it will be a severing of a social bond that was important to us. So, Abby, those are the 5 fears. You brought up a person who died in your life. Who was it?
A lot of people, but I specifically mentioned my grandmother.
A lot of people?
A lot of people have died.
Many ex-husbands?
No husbands, only blood relatives.
But you mentioned one person specifically.
My grandmother?
Your grandmother. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's try the 5 fears of death with her. Okay. So did she suffer in the end?
She suffered because she wasn't allowed to die.
Okay, but in her final breath, do you think she was suffering?
No, I think she was grateful to have reached the end.
Was she in the hospital?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think she was on painkillers?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I think that's how we all want to go. Painkillers. And if we do that, then that is sort of one fear of death alleviated, because we have, although Abby and I speak out against unmoderated technology, some technologies such as anesthetics and these sort of things, we feel have value and should continue, should continue. Like that sentence should have not continued. Number 2, did she have a lot of friends who needed her as a social bond?
They obviously loved and supported her, but they were at an age themselves where they had other social connections, so they wouldn't have been alone. And they also understood, because of the suffering and the position she was in, they wanted her, for her own good, because they loved her, to be able to end her life.
Did she have a husband?
He died a long time ago.
Okay, so her husband, that bond was already gone, so we didn't have to worry about that bond.
By decades, yeah.
Okay. Number 3, did she have any children or dependents she was caring for when she died?
No, they were all adults.
Were your family concerned that they would die right after her because she died?
No, I don't think motor neurons is contagious.
We do hope not. And had she done some good in her life?
A lot of good. She was incredible.
At the state she was in at the end, was she likely to do a lot more incredible things?
No.
Sometimes in the book of life, the chapters of best writing are behind us. That is what life is about. So it's important to write those chapters when the time is right. It's important to remove damage so that we can have those strong chapters to look back on and read as we close the final pages of our book. And so, Abby, what you're describing is a death that, if it had just come a bit more easily, would have been a death that wouldn't need to have been feared.
No. And I think as a society, we need to move away from death is unknown, therefore scary, therefore bad, which seems to be how we treat everything as humans that we are not familiar with intimately, and be able to understand that it is better to allow a peaceful, chosen, older age, specifically death, at the time which is right for the individual who has lived a full life, rather than try to force technology to artificially extend a life that may not wish to be extended. That's not fair.
Although it is interesting, Abby, as society becomes more damaged, do we hear on television about celebrities or other people trying to stay younger and live for a longer time, or trying to do the opposite? How is the social zeitgeist moving in this barometer?
All I can picture is William Shatner. That man is trying to be immortal, and he looks younger every year. But I don't know how old he is. I truly don't. But he must be older now. But he is very famously trying to cheat death. Very famously.
Sort of as a society, we've started to, because of damage, sort of applaud any technology that sort of looks to extend life. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I think there are some famous personalities who are trying to make strides into immortality and in that direction.
There's a very large difference between a quality of life that is extended, staving off cancer, staving off dementia, staving off stroke, staving off heart attack, staving off arthritis and joint pain and morbid obesity and things that decrease your quality of life, and physically being alive longer. They're different things, and we need to understand and accept that as a society. And I think once we do, and we accept that it's the quality of the life that matters, I think we'll make really important strides forward.
That's right. And a sheep often tries to stave off staves, because the shepherd has a stave. What's staff? Stave, I don't know. You just said stave a lot. And then I thought of the word stave. It made me think of Steve.
Steve the shepherd?
Steve the shepherd, as we all know Steve the shepherd. So you made good points, but I got distracted. The point is, damaged societies are moving towards fetishizing living as long as possible. And we, in our social blueprint, in the philosophy, want to remind ourselves and hopefully future generations that the best way to live
is well.
And part of that is dying appropriately and in good time and with dignity, and greeting death as a friend at the appropriate time with good consent.
So let's move towards treating life as being fulsome and well lived.
Yes,
And as soon as that quality is gone, allowing death to be a discussion.
that's very true. That's very well said. And on that note, thank you for watching. Thanks as always for tuning in to Dancing with Damage.
Hope you have a great day.